Alexandra Eala walked off center court to a standing ovation. She had just lost. 6-4, 6-love. 73 minutes that ended a run nobody outside her own team truly believed was possible 2 weeks earlier. But the crowd wasn't standing because they felt sorry for her. They were standing because of what those 2 weeks had cost her, and what she had given for them anyway. Sobeys Stadium in Toronto had never sounded like this before. Not for a round of 16 match. Not for a player making her tournament debut in the city. Philippine flags filled entire sections. Chants of her name rolled down from the upper bowl in waves loud enough that organizers moved her matches to center court just to accommodate the demand a level of ticket interest tournament director Carl Hale himself pointed to as extraordinary. For a 21-year-old from Quezon City, it felt less like an away match and more like a home game staged 4,000 miles from home. She had arrived in Toronto on the kind of high that doesn't come around twice in a career. 7 days earlier, in Washington, she had done something no Filipino had ever done: won a WTA Tour singles title. She'd gone down a set to world no. 3 Jessica Pegula in the final. Then come storming back. 4-6, 6-4, 6-0, closing the match by winning the final 8 games in a row without facing a single breakpoint. It sent her to a career-high ranking of no 20 in the world. It sent congratulations flooding in from names most players only watch from the stands. Rafael Nadal, whose academy in Spain has been her training base since she was 13 years old. Since a family reached out and offered her a scholarship, she almost couldn't believe, posted his own message online. An incredible week, he called it. A well-deserved trophy. There was no time to let any of it sink in. The tour doesn't wait for anyone to catch their breath. Within days, she was back on court in Toronto, and the draw kept finding new ways to test whatever she had left. To understand why a stadium in Canada was ready to erupt for her, you have to go back further than one title in Washington. Eala left home at 13 to train at the Rafael Nadal Academy in Manacor, Spain, after the academy reached out to her family and offered her a scholarship. "The academies played a pretty big role in my life," she has said of that decision. "I went to train there at 13. They reached out to my family, and I went there as a scholar. It was there, thousands of miles from Quezon City, that the foundations of this summer were built long before anyone outside junior tennis circles knew her name." The results came early. In 2022, she won the U.S. Open girls singles title, the first junior Grand Slam singles crown in Philippine tennis history. Before that, junior doubles majors at the Australian Open in 2020 and the French Open in 2021. It was a resume that made the tennis world start paying attention long before Washington ever happened, and it's part of why, when she finally broke through on the main tour, players far more experienced than her were the first to say they'd seen it coming. Jessica Pegula herself, the very opponent Eala beat in that Washington final, called her the future of the tour. First, Alicia Parks, the same player who had beaten her in straight sets back in January 6-6, 6-3, 6-2. This time, Eala got through it. Then Caty McNally, in a match that would end up defining the entire fortnight before it had even finished. 3 sets, in front of an electric, flag-waving center court crowd on a Friday night, 6-3, 5-7, 6-4. Somewhere in the middle of that match, Eala rolled her right ankle, landing awkwardly off a forehand. She called for a medical timeout. Her ankle went under heavy tape, wrapped tight enough to hold, tight enough to hide how much it hurt. And then, because the match and the streak and the crowd all needed her to, she kept playing. By the 3rd set, the tape was gone. So was any margin for error. She served it out anyway, and afterward all she could say was, "I think I survived that one." 7 straight wins, a number that had become the story of her summer, and a body quietly paying for every one of them. Nobody gets through a stretch like that for free. 8 matches in roughly 12 days. A title. A taped ankle. A rain-delayed final that stretched across 2 days before it was even finished. A nervous system running on adrenaline and momentum long after the body underneath it had asked to stop. Waiting on the other side of the draw was Belinda Bencic, a Tokyo Olympic gold medalist, the 2015 Toronto champion, and a player who, it would turn out, has quietly owned this tournament for a decade in a way few people talk about. Toronto is Bencic's happy hunting ground. The win over Eala would become her 18th career victory at the National Bank Open, more than she has recorded at any other WTA 1000 event on the calendar, her next highest total sitting at 15 in Indian Wells. This was also, strangely, her 10th consecutive win over a left-handed opponent, a streak stretching back to 2024, a statistic Bencic herself admitted afterward that she found almost hard to believe. Their first ever tour meeting arrived with Eala 2 matches deep into exhaustion, and Bencic fresh, sharp, and playing with nothing to prove except her own game plan. The first set stayed tight and tense into its 9th game. 2 early double faults from Eala cracked the door open. Bencic walked through it, broke serve, and served out the set 6-4. It was the second set where the gap became impossible to hide. Bencic broke immediately, broke again to open a 3-0 lead, and never let go from there, winning 8 return points on Eala's first serve alone, closing out the match 6-0 in just over an hour. Across the whole match, Bencic won 62% of total points and converted 6 of 10 breakpoint chances. It was, by any measure, a clinical, comprehensive result. And even Bencic seemed to sense exactly what she'd been up against and who the crowd had really come for. "I know most of you were cheering for Alex," she told the stadium afterward, "but it was very nice for me to play in front of you all. Thank you so much for the great crowd." For Eala, it was her first straight sets loss in months since a round of 32 exit to Elise Mertens back at the Bad Homburg Open. The 7-match streak, the longest of her career, ended in one afternoon. And still the ovation. Because the people in those stands hadn't just watched a scoreline. They had watched someone play through a taped ankle to win a 3-setter 2 nights earlier. They had watched someone arrive in their city carrying the weight of a nation's expectations less than a week after the single biggest win of her career, and give whatever she had left to give, right up until there was nothing left. Eala herself didn't try to dress any of it up as something it wasn't. "Tough one today," she said afterward. "She put me in some really tough situations." But there was no self-pity in how she framed the 2 weeks as a whole. "Overall, a really good week. I'm super happy with the run I've had, and I'm going to try to recover and come back out hot." That's the sentence worth sitting with. Not "I lost." I'm going to come back out hot. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that only shows up once the adrenaline finally leaves the tired that hits when there's nothing left to fight for that afternoon. Eala admitted as much, describing that first quiet wave of feeling tired and down once the match had ended. It's an honest admission, not a dramatic one. Anyone who has ever pushed a body past what it wanted to give knows that feeling eventually arrives, win or lose. What matters more is what she chose to carry forward instead of sitting in it. Because here is what 2 weeks across North America actually added up to. Once you step back from one final scoreline, a maiden WTA Tour title, a win over the world's no-3 player, a career-high ranking inside the top 20, a 3-set battle through a rolled ankle that she refused to let end her tournament early, and a fan base that turned an entire stadium in a foreign country into something that felt, for a few unforgettable nights, unmistakably like home. A 6-0 second set doesn't erase any of that. It's just where the story happened to land on one particular Sunday night in August. Ahead of her now is Cincinnati, where she'll arrive seated and with a first-round bye already built into the draw, a rare, deliberate gift of rest before the next climb begins. Then New York, and a U.S. Open that will ask an entirely different set of questions. What she carries into both isn't really about the ankle, which will heal, or the fatigue, which will pass with a few quiet days, a haircut, the small ordinary things she laughingly admitted she'd been putting off for weeks. It's about the version of herself she has now shown twice in the space of a single summer, the one who gets broken down to a bagel set by an Olympic champion and still calls the fortnight a positive. The one who gets taped up mid-match on a rolled ankle and finds a way to win anyway, because survival was the only option on the table. 21 years old. Career-high no-20 in the world. A trophy from Washington still fresh enough that the congratulations from legends of the sport haven't even finished arriving. And a stadium full of people who came out to cheer a win, watched her lose instead, and rose to their feet regardless. Because some performances earn the ovation no matter how the scoreboard reads at the end. That's not the end of a run. That's just the shape a great one sometimes takes on its way toward the next chapter. Cincinnati is next. New York is after that. And if the last 2 weeks are any indication of what's coming, Alexandra Eala isn't finished writing this story. She's just getting to the part where the real test begins.